Everything's exactly the same except for no fletching on it. But if you look close on here, what I did do is I wrapped electrical tape around the same spot that my fletching would be. I'm not assuming that we're going to be shooting at 100 yards or anything, but you still want to make sure that your bow is tuned the way that you expect it to be. You know, you got to see how we went about choosing the arrow and broadhead and all my situations, you know, what we're going to use here for the buffalo hunt. And so stay tuned and we'll see how it all turned out. Thanks again for watching. You got to look at the little things. Most people will put in food plots and do a couple things. It's okay, that's good. But my neighbor does that too. 448 is about what this arrow will be. Here are my shots at 100 yards. I think this was my field tip, the first one. So last night I went through and picked out my arrows, spine aligned them all and marked them here. And kind of went through a bunch of the weights and started adding them up on my grain scale here and with different inserts and you know, with what head I'm going to use, if it's 100 or 125s. And what I came up with for weight-wise was an arrow that's about 450 grains or 448, and which is a little heavier than I like, but it's still shooting at 296, and I'm pretty happy with that and with the setup. So what I decided on was to go with the 300 spine instead of a 350. The 350s, you know, with the way I want to shoot it, it's a little bit weak spine, and I normally had shot those, but with not quite as much weight up in front. And so I went with the 300s and going through a bunch of the different fletching from AAE. And normally I used to use, like the past few years, it's been awesome vein for me, just a 2-inch AAE hybrid 2.0, I believe it was, but it was a shield cut. And so this year I'm going to go with, just because on this hunt for sure, because I'm going to use a fixed head, and I just wanted to have a little bit better steering on it with a little bit bigger fletching. This is a Plastifletch Max. It's a new one from them. It's a 23, so it's a 2.3 inch, and it's just a regular cut, not a shield cut. And I've just found over the years that the shield cuts, even though I love that fletching, they're a little bit noisier as they're rotating than just the regular back one like that. So the fletching tool that I use here is from Last Chance Archery. It's called the Vein Master Pro, and I just really like this one because it's just got 2 wires in here, and you can kind of set this wherever you want. You loosen it up, and it's got a scale here, and I just put a silver mark on mine because when you pull it back, you know, I don't want the fletching to be into my mouth or touching or anything like that. I just want it out in front of my mouth for where my draw is, so that my face isn't interfering with the flight at all. And so I just have a mark there, so that's why I put it at all the time. And there's a red mark and a black mark on these wires, and I just use the black mark, and it's just random. It's just so you get the same spot all the time. With the hybrids, you don't need the pen, but on just the regular Plastifletch Maxes you do. So they come with this Maxwell primer pen. So you just get a little primer on, then you can just see it already, like that vein start to kind of curl up there. And what it does is it kind of almost melts the vein there, and so it goes with this with their glue. So when you put that thing on, I mean, you basically need pliers to pull it off. And what I do is with the glue, I just cut it at an angle on there. And so what I like to do is I just like to put a series of little dots down the back edge of the vein, and then turn it around to the pointy side, and I just kind of run that up and down, so there's not dots, it's just glue all the way across the whole thing, but very little. I don't like a bunch of glue that's globbing and hanging out and turning your veins out, or your arrow shaft all white and stuff from that glue. So very, very minimal amount, like I said, just little dots, spread it out. Then on this, it's set up, you look on the back side here, it's a left helical 2 degree. There's the pin you put in there. So you put up against that pin, so I'm using a 2 degree offset on it, and with a left helical. And like I said, for every Matthews bow, the way that the strings are twisted, that'll come off spinning counterclockwise, which is a left helical, and that's what you want, because if you do a right helical, it'll go out and it'll knuckleball and then start spinning right again. I just don't like that time period where it's knuckleball and that those veins aren't doing anything. If you had a bunch of wind or whatever, it could push it out of, push it out of alignment or push it out of, where you're off your target at a time where, well, it's not spinning. So I just like to make sure everything is left helical. 2 degree is enough for me, especially, when I'm using 4 fletching here. So I was debating to use just a 4-inch max stealth, and that would steer this super good, but I just like using the smaller vane that's not quite as tall as the bigger ones. I mean, the taller they are, obviously the more rotation they're gonna give it and the better steering it's gonna have. But with that, you give up, like out west, we get so much crosswinds and heavy winds, especially in Alberta. I mean, it's always blowing 30 or 40. So I just figure if this is spinning with a lower profile vane, they'll have less wind drag over to the side and just put more vanes on it to give it enough rotation to still steer a broadhead. And I've had just great luck with even the 2-inchers over the years with a mechanical, but now with the fixed head, I'm going with a 2.3 instead. So really all you need to do is leave that vane on there for literally a couple seconds with the primer pen. When you put them in, I'll put it to the black line on there, take the pen, and like I said, there's really 0 dry time. When you put it on the pen, it's kind of melting the plastic almost of the vane, and then give it a couple of series of dots down the edge there, turn it over. If I get a little extra, I'll just wipe it off. I just do not like globs of glue on the arrow shaft. I like it nice and smooth, nothing down the side. Put it on, and literally, I can put it on like this. I could just, if I'm doing something, I could basically get out my next vane that I'm going to use, a couple of them, and I could pull it off literally that quick. And so I can basically almost just keep fletching about nonstop without having to really stop in between. So I can just give it a brush with that, normal speed when I'm not talking. Just put some dots down that, put it over, smooth it out, make sure there's none on the sides. Put it on, make sure it's on there. Grab my next vane, I can basically pull it off and put on the last one. So basically, just as we've been talking here for a couple minutes, you can basically fletch an arrow even with 4 vanes. Like I said, if this was 3 vanes, it would be, it'd even be quicker yet. But get some of that off of there. A few dots on there. And that's it. 4 vanes on right there. Left helical, 2 degree. When I'm done, I just take that off. Take this off and then put this end on there just to kind of make sure it's holding your knock up tight in there so your vanes are all the same spot. So I'm done, take that off, spin it like this, and normally I just make sure there's no glue in between. And then what I always do at the end is I'll take this and just put just a little dot on the ends of the arrow back here, just to give a little extra strength where, when you're shooting it, if it goes through, if you're shooting at a target and it goes all the way through, your animals, hopefully they go all the way through, it doesn't grab an edge and rip a vane off at all. Just give it a little strength on the front and back ends. So there it is, the arrow that we're going to use on our buffalo hunt. I'll probably just take this arrow right into elk season, because really by the time we get home, it'll be, July, and get back and work on planting all our fall food plots if it ever rains, and we get some rain, and we even have fall food plots. By the time I'm done with those, it'll be August, and I'll be heading up to Alberta and then right on to elk from there. So what I did here is I looked, when I put all these together, before I even fletched any or before I put any nocks or inserts in. I put them all on my grain scale and just tried out every different combination with broadheads and inserts and everything. And I came up with, you know, because I wanted a little bit heavier spine. And so I ended up with 4 fletching of these, of the Plastifletch Max 23s. And then with the 40, it's like 42 grains, whatever, on the insert. So you've got a real light insert from Carbon Express. It's like a 17 or something like that, a real light one. And then there's a middle one, which is this one, like a 40, and you got a heavier one as well. And so the middle one with a 100 grain head still gave me like just over 11% FOC, which you always want like more than 10. I'd like to have like 13 or more, but that's not as important to me as like the speed and everything else. And when I shoot this arrow, barring anything drastic, which I know there won't be, 11% FOC is perfect. I mean, it'll work just fine. So the way that I put in my broadheads, and I decided on broadheads here that I was going to go with a 100 grain Wacom. Just the ones that I had here, I have a 100 grain hybrid broadhead here, but I just didn't want any retractables. I just wanted to make sure I get, you know, just solid on a Buffalo, just the heavy dutiest, you know, blades that I could get. And the other muzzies that I have, like the Trocar, I've definitely used those, but just that right helical that it has on the vein or on the blades just bothers me. It probably would be insignificant. It probably wouldn't even be, you know, you'd never notice it, I'm sure. But still in my mind, it bothers me. So I decided not to go with the Trocar, even though I would shoot any one of these broadheads. And this Muzzy one, and the only ones I have were 125 grain, which certainly I would have used this one if we were going with, if I needed a 125 grain head. But the Wacoms that we had, that from Faradyne, the 3-blade Wacom was 100 grain, good solid head, super heavy duty. I heard great things about them. So the way that I do is I'll put, these will be some of my practice heads. So take that, the head there, and I just put a little glue on the end down there. And so what I'd like to do is I want to make sure all my broadheads are kind of aligned exactly the same. Again, that probably doesn't make any difference, but just in my mind it does. I want every arrow exactly the same, and that's why we went through and spine aligned them. We do all this stuff to make sure they're exactly the same. And so I put glue with the head on it. I see where my mark is, where my weak spine is at the top. So then I'll just put it in there and give it a spin and stop it right at the top. So I've got it just perfect, lined up here, and you gotta do that fast before it dries, and there we go. So then I'll just take a napkin here and wipe off the excess glue on there, and there we go. So when I set them down, the weak spine's at the top, along with the one blade right at the very top, so they sit like this. That's the way they'll come out of my bow, not just this arrow, practice arrow. Every arrow that I have with this broadhead on it will come out this way. And like I said, it probably doesn't make any difference. It could probably be any direction when you're shooting it, but just in my mind, I want every arrow to be identical. So when I put this all together, we had 448 grains, I believe. Yeah, so 447, 448 is about what this arrow will be. And normally I'll shoot like a 430 grain, and this one's like, you know, another 15 to 20 grains heavier than I would normally shoot. So if you haven't looked at Archer's Advantage, you need to, and that's one of the reasons why I use a Hogfather sight too. Not just because it's the best, it's the strongest. That Hogfather sight is like the strongest, the best sight I've ever used. It's just been fail-safe. Sheep hunts, you can drop it, fall on it, everything else. People, you hear the excuse all the time, but you know, I drop my bow and bump my sight off. I say, there's no bumping this sight off. Trust me, you can throw it off the roof 100 times and you ain't gonna damage that sight, and that's what I love about it. But on that site, it works with, a lot of other sites do too, but this one works on the Archer's Advantage. And for me, with this computer program on that site, I can literally be sighted in from 0 yards, like 1 yard, to 150 yards, and I can be done with it literally in 20 minutes. And like, what other site are you going to get every single yard, every pin, like have a pin for 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, I mean up to 150 in 20 to 30 minutes. Can't be done. This is the way you do it. And it's so accurate and so easy to use. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go in my setup on here, and as you see, it's not, I had to just grab an arrow in here because the Photon that I'm using, the Carbon Express Photon, it's brand new for this year, so it's not in their lineup of arrows. So if I can look in here in shaft manufacturing, normally I'd go to Carbon Express and put in the Photon and have all that information for me. But since this arrow is a little bit different, I happened to find one in here that was basically the exact same weight, same spine. The diameter is just a smudge off, but it's be close enough. And we have to do that all the time. I mean, for bows, every year I get a new bow and it's not on here yet. Like, I'm gonna use my Phase 4 right now for this buffalo hunt. Like last year at this time when I had my Phase 4, it wasn't even a bow configuration yet. So you have to just pick a bow that's similar to it. And to still when you put all the numbers together, it doesn't really matter. It's more where you're shooting with it and your weight of your arrow. So I just pick out, you know, your shaft details. Of course, the Photon isn't in here yet, but I found one. This is my arrow length. It's a 300. The spine is a 0.3 grains per inch, which was the important thing. It's 8.9 that matches this, and a 0.3 spine. And the diameter, if I look on this for a Photon 300, is 0.266. And this is 0.275. So it's just slightly bigger on this, but it won't make that much difference. And then I'll show you your FOC up here, and it's 11.5. So you're getting close to 12. Like I said, I'd like to be 13 to 15, but that's close enough. I mean, if your fletching is doing its job, anything over 10 on that, it'll be fine. And your point details with the 100 grain here, and here's my point adapter, and knock details. See, I just put it under generic knock, but the weight on the nocturnals is 23, and a lot of times I can it'll be in here. You could probably find you could take a nocturnal on this and an X, and they're saying 25, but when I weigh it on mine, on that scale, it says 23, but we can leave it at 25 on there. Fletch details, and again, that's a brand new, this Plastifletch Max 23s, but it's basically the same as a hybrid 23, 2.3 inches. Weight is still 5.4 grains per fletch, 4 fletching on it. And so basically with all that, you put it in and you'll have your weight. You know, it makes it so easy. You put in your arrow, your point, your knock, your fletching, and bang, it comes out and it'll tell you, what your arrow weight is. And then you can also, it gives you your FOC. You can go to shaft selector 2 on here, so you can see like mine it sits right at optimum spine. When I had the 350s in there, it was marginal weak over there. So this will tell you if the arrow and configuration that you're running is in there, where it is in your spine. And so this is optimal spine for 30-inch draw and 70 pounds. So I can go back to my setup here, and that's for the arrow. So now I go to a sight configuration, and I got a Hogfather, and these are just from every year. I know you measure from at full draw from your peep to your sight, and I got 31.5, and then the peep height to your arrow straight down. You take 2 measurements there, and this is 3.5, and that's all you need. And then your bow configuration here, I got, now I have the Phase 4s in here, 29-inch Phase 4, 30-inch draw, 70 pounds, and I can just put it in. Those are already all in here. So now I'm done. So it just takes me 5 minutes to put all my information in here, and now it's in there. So now I go to sighted in on here, and all I have to do is set in at 20 and 50, and then I kind of see what my 100 yard is, and then I basically just shoot at 100 yards most of the summer. And so at 100 yards, every little thing, you'll see it. It's, you know, if you're shooting at 20 yards in a 3-inch dot and it's right here, you think, oh, that's perfect. It's at 6 o'clock in the dot. But now that shot at 100 yards on a 10-inch circle, maybe down here you miss it, and so you know, it's like, okay, my bow is shooting a little bit low. It wasn't just me up here. It sort of accentuates every mistake and all your yardages. So now, you know, just even one little click on the sight will bring that up quite a bit, where you wouldn't really know at 50. So at 100 yards, that's where I shoot most of the time, at 100 yards, and then you get all the little left and rights and up and downs and stuff really put together, and especially in your release. You'll see, if you grip it a little bit, you know, just give it a little, you know, flinch a little bit, you'll see how far off that makes your arrow go at 100 yards. And so to get it in the 10-inch circle at 100, everything has to be perfect. And boom, it'll go right in there. And like I said, actually that relationship between that 10-inch circle where I have painted on that target at 100 to my pin is a lot easier to hold my pin on than the little 3-inch one at 50. So it's not hard to hold your bow on it. It's hard to make a perfect executed shot and hit it in that center every time. So that's why we mostly shoot at 100. And then once I get that range down, I put in for 100 and that 20, and then everything in between 20 and 100 just lines right in. You print off your tape and you're done. So basically all I have to do is I set in at 20 and 50, and I see what the 100 is, and then most of the time I'll just shoot the whole summer at 100 and get that really tuned in and really practice those shots and your form and how you're squeezing off and everything. And that'll give you your best form, because if you just sat and pounded 1,000 times into 20, you might hit every one in a 3-inch circle, and you might think you're shooting great, but those same shots, same executed shots in a 10-inch circle at 100 might be all over in a 5-foot circle. And you're like, man, those are terrible. So really try to work on bringing that down into a 10-inch circle at 100 yards. And like I said, it's not hard to hold your pin on there. It's just, you have to, your muscle memory becomes making a perfect shot all the time, and it'll go right in there. It's easy to hold your pin in that 10-inch circle. It's not easy to execute a perfect shot where it goes in the center all the time. So that's what you want to keep practicing. And then of course every you know, once a week or something, I'll go through my 20, 30, 40, 50 and hit a bunch of them. And you'll be surprised. Like most of the time people shoot pretty good at 20, 30 is pretty good, 40 gets a little iffy, and 50 they fall apart. I mean, from all the people I've had overshooting and things, you get to that 50-yard target, and that's where people kind of start falling apart. And that's about where your form starts really playing an important part. So if you do that and you shoot at 100 all the time and get your form really good, there, all of a sudden you go to those 50-yard shots that used to be hard, and it's like, boy, it just like feels like you're shooting at a medicine ball, you know, even though it's a small target. Boy, this is simple. Boom, boom, boom. You put them right in there, you shoot way better than you ever have. So even at 100 yards, if you don't feel like, you know, confident, oh, that's too far for me, trust me, that's where you want to shoot, and it'll make those, not that you want to shoot an animal necessarily that far or shoot anything that far, but it'll greatly improve your form. So those 40 and 50-yard shots that used to be hard for you before are easy now. So let's go downstairs, down at our shop, even though my shop isn't done down there yet, so you have to forgive me on that. Well, I'll show you what we do on tuning our bows down there. And after that, we'll get it sighted in the shop at 20 yards, then we'll go outside and get it on 50, and all the rest of them will fall into place, and we'll be able to print off our sight tape. Okay, so I'm down in my shop. Like I said, I have to excuse the basement as we're not done yet, but I still had to just get my shop stuff down here, and hopefully by this winter we'll get somebody free up and be available to come and finish our shop. But right now, we're not worried about that. This is my paper tuner, and just fold it out. I got paper in there, block target back there. And what I'll use here is I've got one of my arrows here is a 300, same exact arrow that we had upstairs, fletched, cut. Everything's exactly the same except for no fletching on it. But if you look close on here, what I did do is I wrapped electrical tape around the same spot that my fletching would be, and just to give it the exact same weight, just so it's the same weight and everything. So when I shoot this through paper, I don't like having the vanes on there, because sometimes those vanes are spinning, and sometimes they'll grab, and even though you can still see what kind of a hole it makes, but sometimes that fletching will grab and tear it and stuff, and I just like seeing like a perfect little bullet hole. It looks like a 22 went through it. And plus you want this, this non-fletched bare shaft arrow for tuning later as well. So this is what I'll normally use. So I just come over here and make sure that okay, and so I know this bow was already tuned. Like I said, it's not a new one. It's my one I used last year. But if you look at that, the hole on there, that's what you want to see. It just looks like maybe you shot a 22 through there. And since, like I said, I know this bow was already tuned, if this tear was way over here, and here on a Matthews, what I do is I just set it up through a 90 off of the string, right through the burger button hole there, when it's up, when your rest is all the way up, and then right in the center here, which I believe is like 13/16 if I remember right. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what it is. But I always kind of just line it up with my stabilizer and stuff, and look to make sure it's perfect left and right, and shoot it through paper like this. I don't want to mess with I want my arrow to be perfectly straight through that burger button hole. I don't want it sitting way in or sitting way out. I get it nice and straight on there, and then if I have a tear over here, you just change the top hats. I got my bow press over there. You just pull the axle out. They're different size top hats. Basically, they're just different thicknesses. So if your tear is to the right, you want to move your cam to the right. So if I had a fat top hat over here and a skinny one over here, I'd just turn them around. Put the skinny one over here to move your whole cam over. Put the fatter one on that side and move it over, and that would clear that up. And if it was up or down, then of course you have to, normally I'll just move my knock a little bit or the rest up and down. I don't want it sitting, way up or down. But really, if you have that square on here, that should always be perfectly, you should never get up or down tear if you look at that. If you do, likely your timing is off a little bit. You want to pull that back and see if your stops are hitting on the cable exact same time, because that was normally, when you have that at a 90 right off of here, if you're getting an up or down tear, it's not your rest. It's normally timing on your cam. So I'll just pull it back, and I'll look where the stop right here comes around, hits the cable, and you see if this one is a little faster than that one. If this one touches before that one, okay, then I gotta adjust this one to speed that wheel up a little bit so they both touching at the same time. And that will almost always clear up your up and down if you are just at a 90 on here through your burger button hole. But left and right, I'll move my top hats on here, and normally I don't ever have to touch my rest until we do the bare shaft tuning down here. If it's off a little bit, that's where I would make small adjustments on my left and right on my rest. But all the big adjustments are done right here with the top hats, and I can usually always get it like this, at least a bullet hole like that with the top hats, and I don't have to mess with the in and out, because that's the way this bow was designed to shoot. Was it 90 off of here, straight through the center, 13/16 off the wall there, and everything else should be done with the cams. Just grab an arrow. Things I want to make sure I have the same nocks. There's on these nocturnals, we have several different styles. There's an older style that's thinner, and a newer style that's a little fatter, and it doesn't really make any difference to me. They both work great. Never had one break. They're both super strong. I just like to keep them consistent. And so what was on there was the older style, and basically for me, I'll just look and see what I have. Most of my nocks, if they're the old style or the new style, and that's what I'll use. Right now I have more of the old styles in the X's, in the X knock, so I'll just keep using those for now. So anyway, I'll go over here down to my archery lane here, and we'll shoot. And we won't shoot a bunch because it should be close, and that's not the whole point of this anyway. I just wanted to show you with the bare shaft. So what I normally do is I'll put just a little tiny dot down, like the 1 inch, because just I want it to be exact. I don't want it to be kind of close at 20. It's just as important to get it on a 20 as it is at 100. And so even though that's a little bit low and right, like I said, first I have new arrows. It doesn't really make that much difference to me. I can tune that right on and get that right on at 20. What is most important to me is shooting a bare shaft. Just, you want to hit it in that same spot. And just from like over the years, you kind of notice if you use left helical like I do, a bare shaft should hit maybe like at 4 o'clock. So it might be just a little off, and I want to make sure this is within an inch of that. And if it's anything, it might be a little on the right side, and that just is because of on a left helical. Now, if you have a right helical, you might see it on the left side, like at 7 o'clock, just a little bit. So that's kind of normal. You don't have to be moving it right on that, just because the helical, whichever way you have that on a fletched arrow, makes this hit just slightly right or slightly left. So I wouldn't move it if I'm just slightly on the right side of this for me with the left helical. So, but with a bare shaft is where you're going to see how your bow is tuned. So let me take this right at my other nock. Okay, so that's about what you would expect. I said for it to be a little bit low and a little bit right for a left helical, that 4 o'clock. That's kind of what you would expect for it at 20 to 30 yards. But again, you see how there's nice and parallel those are. Like this one is not at some angle in, out, up, or down, but just right next to it, and that's within human error. So that just tells me that both through paper and bare shaft testing, it tells me that my bow is shooting good. It's perfectly tuned, and when I put a fixed blade broadhead on there, that should fly the exact same as my field tips. And one thing that I always do is I take that one with me on the road. That's the one way you can check. You don't always have a paper tuner. Sometimes you go from 90 degrees at sea level, you go to freezing at 10,000 feet, or vice versa. You're going all over the place. You don't know if things can move and stretch and other things. I always have this with me. At least you can always shoot an arrow into something. Shoot this one, and you see if it's way off one way or another to make those little adjustments when you're on the road. So I would just keep that one with me. If I'm shooting broadheads or something and it seems like something is flying a little goofy, or see a bunch of whoosh, something, and don't let that fool you. It's just like, even if you have a little bit of breeze outside, a little bit of crosswind, sometimes you'll see that wiggle a little bit, and that's not necessarily your bow. But like for me, when I'm inside like this or outside, I really like to shoot those long distances in the evening where you got like very little wind and stuff. And that way, if you start seeing movement on it like that, you go, something might be off on my bow. And if it is, if your field tip is starting to make some wobbly stuff going down that you see, you put a broadhead on, you'll see it won't be hitting where your field tip is. That's what's nice to have this with you all the time, to go to 20 and 30 yards and get those things matched up just by making slight movements with your rest on this one, and she'll bring you right back in. So let's go out and shoot some broadheads and make sure that what we've done, we still can shoot fixed blade broadheads. As you can see, when there's wind out here, it's whoosh, and that's fine, but that's why I really like shooting at dusk, like where there's no wind sometimes, and you just see that the arrow flight is perfect. And even now, you see the wiggle, that's from it correcting from that wind, blowing it around. I gave it like half a bubble into the wind. Like you said, you can feel the wind here, but this is the house blocking it. When you come from this, when you get out, just out to past where we've planted the yard, that wind is coming across there fast. So I was giving it half a bubble basically into the wind to compensate for a little bit so it's not shoving it way left. So that's what the field tip, at 100. And like I said, this is the first time I've been shooting this year. Normally, your first hunt isn't until September 1st. And now it's, normally this is about when we really start shooting and getting our bows tuned up and all that. So it's just the early side. We had such an early hunt with this buffalo, but I'm not assuming that we're going to be shooting at 100 yards or anything, but you still want to make sure that your bow is tuned the way that you expect it to be. Yeah. So it just shows you that, your field tip and my broadhead are basically at 100 yards, 2 or 3 inches apart. And they're gonna tell me like both of them are on kind of the bottom side of the dot. And to be honest with you, I think that's basically kind of where my pin was. Instead of putting it right in the middle, you're kind of holding it in there that you still see how much of it's showing. So it's likely it's probably right on, but I'll shoot a couple more. I don't know that I need to, I don't think that it's necessarily shooting lower. I think that's just kind of where my pin was on the bottom side of it on those when it went off. But try one more broadhead. Could be a little bit different, but yeah, it's right in the center, just above those grooves. All right, well there it is in a nutshell. I shot one field tip at 100 yards and 2 broadheads, and they're all within a 5-inch group at 100 yards right there. So your broadhead, even with a fixed blade in this kind of wind, that it basically tells me that my fletching is big enough. I didn't need to go to a Stealth Max or a bigger vane. These 4 smaller ones will steer it perfectly. They're both, everything's shooting exactly the same at 100 yards. And that's basically it. That's step by step, the way I take my arrows and bring them right into, all the way up to shooting and get my sight set up. So really, by the time I had my arrows built, figure what those were, it's literally been 15, 20 minutes maybe that I had from shooting at 20 yards to 100 yards. And I can put those in the computer, spit out that tape. And like I said before, that's 20 minutes to get every single individual. And that's why I use a Hogfather, Spot Hog Hogfather, and the Archer's Advantage equipment. But again, I got 8 days until I'm on my buffalo hunt. So just thanks for watching again, and just watch for that buffalo hunt coming. We'll show that to you as soon as it's done, and we'll, you got to see how we went about choosing the arrow and broadhead and all my situations, what we're going to use here for the buffalo hunt. And so stay tuned, and we'll see how it all turns out. Thanks again for watching. We can go down there and just pull those out and look at them. So here are my shots at 100 yards. Like this was my field tip, the first one. And that was likely me, just a little bit, maybe a little bit low on the thing. But these are the two broadheads at 100 yards. That was my second shot, and this is my first one. So you can see that, at 100 yards, it's a good testament to that arrow that I picked the right spine, and like I said, the right veins, right everything, that field tip, broadheads, everything at 100 yards. We're killing a buffalo at 100, even though hopefully we're gonna shoot him at 30.